Hey Trevor, this is Twevy, cute name. This is the first game of yours I have watched, and this is the first couple seconds of that game, so I don't know what to be expecting, but let's give it a roll, Jack. So this is a little late. Usually 12 racks is pretty standard. Obviously, that's not a big deal, but 12 racks, 13 gas, 15 orbital is what you should be shooting for, and obviously if you get a late racks, you can't get a 15 orbital without delaying a little bit. Alright, so your orbital is a tiny bit late, because your racks was a tiny bit late, and none of that is going to matter unless you do it in all 3 games, so just ignore it for now, but you know, it might matter. Oh. No. That first Marine to chase off the scout is pretty common. This tech lab first is cool. Grabbing this is fine. Second racks, good times. Concussive shells, get yourself a marauder. Everything that's going on so far is good. You have map control as Terran against Toss until 6 minutes, but if these units are still out on the map when he gets Warpin finished, see how Warpin is gonna finish around 6 minutes? Then they're basically just kind of useless. Because, so he just finished the research, it's 6 minutes right now. So now he's got to do this, which takes 10 more seconds, so it's going to be 6:10 before he can do that. Nice, I like that. But now he's finished it and he gets to warp in a whole bunch more junk. So a push like this has to hit before he changes these warpy things and then warps in. You'll notice his money is up to 1,000. So you're gonna do okay in this game, but a good toss is not gonna have $1,000 unspent in the bank. I mean, you did okay in this game because your opponent was crap. It looks like what happened was he knew what he wanted to do and he started to do it, and then you attacked him and he focused over here and then just kind of didn't build anything for a while, and his money piled up and piled up and piled up. So he's going to chase you off despite the fact that he's sucking, but look how high your money is. His money is very high, your money is very high. That's always a bad sign to have your money high. But that's obvious. If you watch this replay, you would have noticed that too, so, you know, duh. But another very important thing to note is that you have 19 workers at 6 minutes, and you want to have 24. So 5 out of 25 is 1/5 is 20%. So your economy is 20% smaller than it would be if you had just built all the SCVs on time. So if you watch your command center, I'm sure it feels to you like you're building SCVs every time you can build an SCV. You're watching down here, you're just like, make sure to build an SCV, make sure, look, you missed for a second. Just for a second. You're like, sure, a second doesn't matter. You missed for just a tiny second right there. Just for a tiny second right there. Tiny second right here, well, before your orbital got up. But all these just a tiny seconds add up. Tiny second here. Tiny second here. Tiny second here. And each time, it's almost insignificant. It looks like you're always producing SCVs. You supply blocked yourself. That's really crucial because this isn't just a tiny second. This is 30 seconds while supply depot finishes. So now it's 6:04 instead of 6 minutes. But at 6 minutes, boom, all those teeny tiny fractions of a second added up to be 20% of your economy. It's a huge, very significant deal. So I recommend never, ever, ever trying to be Gosu with your not queuing of SCVs. Always keep at least 2 and sometimes 3 queued up all game, because missing a fraction of a second on each SCVs happen every 17 game seconds. So over the course of a game that is like 700 or 1,000 game seconds long, that's a lot of little clumps of 17 seconds, yo. And if you miss 1 second every 17, that's gonna add up to a lot of SCVs you're missing out on. So you're 4 or 5 SCVs behind, and that's a really big deal. 20% of your economy is just completely missing. But more importantly than that is you got all this money. Now, off one base, you can afford to pump units only most of the time out of these 2 racks, and all of the time out of the 2 racks and some of the time out of the factory. You can't even afford 3 buildings, and yet you have 4 buildings, And you should have 4 buildings. It's good that you made the 4th building, because for a lot of the game you're not building with your buildings. Like, this guy's not doing anything, and then these finish, and look, you're not doing anything, and then these finish, and look, you're not doing anything, and then these finish, and look, you're not doing this. This all comes from watching Day 9 say that queuing up units is bad and misinterpreting his intent. He is saying that if you queue up 10 units, then that's 8 units that aren't even actually being built, and that's $400, and that's a huge deal, right? That is true. You don't want to queue up 10 units, but it is totally acceptable to queue up 4 Marines. Okay, ideal queuing, look, again, there's nothing building here. Ideal queuing of units is to have 1 Marine in this until it's about a quarter of the way done, and then queue up your second one, and so now you have 2, and then it finishes, and now there's 1 for a little while, and then there's 2, and then it finishes, and then there's 1 for a little while, and then there's 2. You want to be bouncing back and forth between 1 and 2 and 1 and 2, and over here it should be between 4 and 2 and 4 and 2. It should never be going to 0. You never ever want to be going to 0, because then you end up with now 5 production facilities off of 1 base. It's been 10 minutes and you only have max saturation just now. 1 base you should be getting 30 workers, which is max saturation, at 8 minutes. So right now you should have 30 workers. And you have 24, so you're missing 6. So again, 6 out of 30 is 1/5, which is 20%. You continue to be 20% behind economically where you should be. And this is 150 plus 50 and 25 is like $200 that could have been 4 Marines if you didn't have to build this. Now again, I'm glad you built it, because you're doing a bad job spending your money, and so you're better off having to build another building than just piling up money in your bank and not spending it ever. But if you were queuing up units at these 3 buildings and just always keeping 1 unit being produced, and then going to 2 for a second, and then back to 1 and 2 to 1 and 2 to 1, then you wouldn't have needed this other building, and you wouldn't have needed this other building, and so on and so forth. So all of that's a very big deal, and what it leads to is a reflection of being 20% behind economically all game is your army size. Okay, we don't necessarily care how big our economy is, except in how that creates us a bigger army, right? So at 6 minutes, it's almost irrelevant how big your army is at 6 minutes, because, you know, that's 6 minutes. But at 6 minutes, you want $1,000 spent on your army, and you have 500 plus 300 is 6, 7, 8, 800. So you're behind by 20%. Hey, notice how you have a 20% smaller economy and a 20% smaller army? That's not a coincidence. All right, then we go to 7 minutes. The next benchmark at 7 minutes is $1,500, and you have $500 spent here, $700 spent here, and 1,000 more, so 1,700. You're actually doing pretty much fine at 7 minutes, and then at 8 minutes, the benchmark is, I think, 2,000. Let's see, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. Yeah, 2,000. So again, this is $500 plus 1,200, so you're short by 300. 300 out of 2,000 is a little bit under, I don't know. 200 behind would be 10%, so it's 15% behind. And then the most important one is right before your attack, right? You're about to attack now, so how big is your army? That's when your army really needs to be big. And the benchmark for 10 minutes is 3,500, and you are at 2,600 plus 5, 6, 7, 700. So that's 7 is 14, 3,400. So you're only short a very small amount. So that's pretty good. You did a good job of having a big army right when you pushed. Your money was high, but then you got it low right before you pushed, and that's great. But you notice how I talk about army spending benchmarks, how much you've spent on army? But army spending doesn't reflect what you're actually attacking with, because you've got 125, 125, 50, and